Gogol, the Russian Molière, once wrote, I cannot remember where, "The true muse of comedy is a woman with tearful eyes under a smiling mask." Remarkable. A strange feeling comes over me as I write these words. The air seems laden with intoxicating smells that make my head spin and ache. The smoke of the fire rises in spirals that turn into figures. Gray-bearded gnomes point at me mockingly. Chubby cupids ride on the back of my chair and climb onto my knee. I smile in spite of myself. I even laugh aloud when I think of my adventures. And yet I am writing with no ordinary ink, but with the red blood that drips from my heart. The wounds that were healed long ago have opened up again and throb with pain. Now and then a tear falls onto the page. The days drift aimlessly by in the little Carpathian health resort. I see nobody, and nobody sees me. It is so dull here that one might take to writing idylls. There would be time enough to fill a gallery with paintings, or write enough plays for a whole season, enough trios and duets for a dozen virtuosi. But when it comes to the point, all that I manage to do is to stretch the canvas, smooth the bow, and line the music paper. For the truth is, no false modesty, Severin, you can deceive others, but alas, not yourself. I am nothing but a dilettante, an amateur in painting, poetry, and music, and in all the arts that are supposed to be unprofitable, but that can nevertheless earn one the income of a cabinet minister, or even of a minor potentate. The truth is that I am an amateur in life. Up to now, I have lived exactly as I have painted and written poetry. That is, I have never progressed far beyond the first brushstroke, the outline of the plot, the first stanza. Some people begin everything and finish nothing. I am one of those. But let us get to the point. I lie on my window seat, gazing at the setting of my despair, savoring its poetry. Before me, a breathtaking view of the blue mountains bathed in a mist of golden sunlight and veined with silver torrents. How clear the sky is, with its towering snowy domes. How green and fresh the wooded slopes and meadows where small herds are grazing, down to the tawny waves of corn where the reapers stoop and rise rhythmically. The house where I am staying is in a sort of park or forest or wilderness, whatever it may be, and very isolated. Its only other inhabitants are a widow from Lwów and the landlady, Madame Tartakowska, a little old woman who grows older and smaller each day, an aged dog with a lame leg, and a kitten that plays endlessly with a ball of yarn. The ball, I believe, belongs to the lovely widow. The widow is said to be very beautiful, still young, 24 at the most, and very rich too. She lives on the first floor. Her green shutters are always drawn, and her balcony is overgrown with green creepers. I occupy the ground floor, and the garden affords a pleasant leafy bower where I read, write, paint, and sing like a bird on the tree. I can see what is happening on the balcony, and sometimes I catch sight of a white gown gleaming through the thick tangle of foliage. And yet the beautiful woman up there does not really interest me, for I am enamored of another. My love is quite without hope, and I am far more miserable than the Knight of Toggenburg or the Chevalier in Manon Lescaut. My beloved is made of stone. In the garden, or rather the small neglected park, there is a charming meadow where a few does graze peacefully. In its center stands a statue of Venus, the original of which I believe is in Florence. This Venus is the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. Of course, this does not mean much, for I have seen few beautiful women, in fact, few women at all. In love, too, I am an amateur who never gets beyond the first brushstrokes, the first act of the play. But why talk in superlatives, as though beauty could ever be surpassed? It is enough to say that she is beautiful, and that I love her madly, passionately, with feverish intensity, as one can only love a woman who responds to one with a petrified smile, ever calm and unchanging. I adore her absolutely. Often, when the dappled sunlight shimmers beneath the trees, I lie in the shelter of a young birch, reading. Often at night I pay a visit to my cold, cruel beloved. Clasping her knees, I press my face against her cold pedestal and worship her. The rising moon, which just now is waxing, creates an indescribable effect. It swims between the trees and floods the meadow with a silvery sheen. The goddess, as if transfigured, seems to bathe in the soft glow. One evening, as I was returning from my place of worship along a wooded path, I suddenly caught sight of a figure through the screen of trees, a woman's form, white as stone and shining in the moonlight. It was as though my dream had come true. The lovely creature had come down from her pedestal to follow me. I was seized with a nameless fear, and my heart pounded as if it would burst. I am an amateur. There is no doubt about it. As usual, I stopped short after the first stanza. Or rather, I did not stop. I fled as fast as my feet could carry me. What a stroke of luck! A Jewish dealer in photographs has found me a replica of my ideal. It is a small reproduction entitled Venus with the Mirror. What a woman! I want to compose a poem, but instead I write on the back of the photograph. Venus in furs. You are cold, and yet you fire the hearts of man. Wrap yourself in your despot's furs, for they become no one so well as you, cruel goddess of beauty and love. A while later, I add a few verses from a poem by Goethe that I have found in the Paralipomena to Faust. To love. His wings belie his nature, and his arrows are but claws. Beneath his crown are budding horns, for without any doubt he is, like all the gods of ancient Greece, a devil in disguise. Then I set the picture before me, propped on a book, and contemplate it. I am enchanted, but at the same time filled with horror by the cold coquetry of the splendid woman enveloping her charms in dark furs, and by the severity and harshness in her marble features. I take up the pen again and write the following lines. To love and to be loved, what joy! And yet how this splendor pales in comparison with the blissful torment of worshipping a woman who treats one as a plaything, of being the slave of a beautiful tyrant who mercilessly tramples one underfoot. Even Samson, the hero, the giant, put himself into the hands of Delilah, who had already betrayed him once, only to be betrayed yet again. And when he was captured and blinded by the Philistines, he kept his brave and loving eyes fixed upon the fair traitress until the very end. I breakfasted under the arbor, reading the book of Judith. I could not help envying the heathen Holofernes, who came to such a bloody end, beheaded by a regal lady. The Lord hath smitten him by the hand of a woman. This sentence made a deep impression on me. How unchivalrous these Jews are, I thought. As for their God, he might choose his words better when speaking of the fair sex. The Lord hath smitten him by the hand of a woman. What must I do for him to smite me? Good heavens, here comes our landlady. She has become smaller still overnight. And up there between the creepers, I catch sight of the white dress again. Is it Venus or the widow? This time it must be the widow, for Madame Tartakovska curtsies to me and asks me on the lady's behalf for something to read. I rush to my room and quickly collect a few books. I remember too late that the photograph of my Venus is in one of them. The lady in white must now be deciphering my outpourings. What will she make of them? I hear her laugh. Is she mocking me? A full moon rises over the small fir trees that border the park. A silvery mist drifts across the terrace and the copses and into the landscape as far as the eye can see. The horizon is blurred like trembling water. I feel a strange and urgent call which I am powerless to resist. I dress again and go out into the garden. I feel irresistibly drawn toward the meadow, toward my goddess, my beloved. The night is cool. I shiver. The air is laden with the heavy smell of flowers and foliage. It is intoxicating. What splendor, what music. A nightingale sighs. The stars quiver in the milky glow of the sky. The meadow is smooth as a mirror, like a frozen lake, and there in the center stands the statue of Venus, shining and stately. But what is this? The goddess is draped in fur. A dark sable cloak flows from her marble shoulders down to her feet. I stand bewildered, transfixed. Again I am gripped by an indescribable panic. I take flight. In my hurry I take the wrong path, and just as I am about to turn off into one of the leafy avenues, there before me, seated on a bench, is Venus. Not the marble beauty of a moment ago, but the goddess of love in person, with warm blood and a beating heart. She has come to life for my benefit like Pygmalion's statue. The miracle is not quite complete, for her hair still seems made of marble, and her white dress gleams like moonlight, or is it satin? The dark fur drapes her from shoulder to toe. But her lips are becoming redder, her cheeks are taking on color. Suddenly her eyes shine with a wicked green glitter. She is laughing. Her laughter is so strange, so, indescribable. It is breathtaking. I take to my heels and run, but each time I pause to catch my breath, I hear the mocking laughter. It follows me down the alleys of scented foliage, over the shining lawns, into the moon-flecked shadow of the thickets. I wander utterly lost, cold beads of sweat on my forehead. At last I stop and say to myself sharply, with oneself one is either very polite or very rude, "You fool!" The effect is immediate, like a magic formula. At once I recover my self-possession and become perfectly calm. Delighted with the discovery, I go on repeating, "You fool." Now everything has become clear and distinct. There is the fountain, there the alley of boxwood, and over there the house which I am slowly approaching. Then all of a sudden, through the screen of foliage embroidered with silver moonlight, I catch sight of the white figure again, the beautiful woman whom I worship and from whom I flee in terror. In no time I am inside the house, panting. What game is this that I am playing, I wonder? Am I a mere amateur or a complete fool? The morning is sultry, the air full of intoxicating smells. I am again seated under my arbor, reading the Odyssey. I have come upon the story of the delightful witch who changed her suitors into wild beasts, a spicy tale of love in ancient times. Suddenly there is a rustling in the branches and in the grass, in the leaves of my elm tree, on the terrace, a woman's dress. It is she, Venus, but without her furs, the widow again, and yet it is Venus. Oh, what a woman! She stands clothed in a vaporous white morning gown, looking at me. What a graceful and poetic figure. She is not tall, but not short either. Her face is not so much beautiful as charming and piquant as in the time of the French marquises. What sensitivity, what sweet impish play about her features, her full lips, her not too small mouth. Her skin is so delicate that her blue veins show through even under the fine muslin that covers her arms and breasts. Her red hair, yes, she is a redhead, not blonde or golden-haired, is gathered in thick curls that tumble with a tantalizing charm onto the nape of her neck. Her eyes alight on me like a shaft of green lightning. Yes, her eyes are green and indescribably soft and powerful, green like precious stones, like the unfathomable depths of mountain lakes. She notices my intense disquiet that has made me impolite, for I have remained seated and still have my cap on my head, and she smiles mischievously. I finally rise and bow to her, and she comes toward me with a loud, almost childlike laugh. I stammer, as only an amateur or a fool can do on such an occasion. Thus we made acquaintance. The goddess asked my name and told me hers. She is called Wanda von Donahue, and she is none other than my Venus. Madame, what an idea! What made you think of it? A little picture in one of your books. I do not recall. Those strange lines on the back. Why strange? She looked at me. I have always wanted to meet a true romantic, someone really different, and I suspect you are even wilder than I thought. Really, madame, Again the stupid, despicable stammering. What is more, I began to blush, more like a boy of 16 than a man 10 years older. I frightened you last night. Yes, indeed, but will you not take a seat? She sat down, delighted at my discomfiture, for I was even more afraid of her now in the broad daylight. A charming expression of contempt quivered on her upper lip. It would seem, she began, that for you love and particularly women are hostile forces. You try to defend yourself against them. However, you are quite overcome by the pleasurable torments and exquisite pain which they afford you, a very modern view. You do not share it? No, I do not, she said boldly and decisively, with a shake of her head that sent her red curls flying like flames. I admire the serene sensuality of the Greeks. Pleasure without pain. It is the ideal I strive to realize. I do not believe in the love preached by Christianity and our modern knights of the spirit. Take a look at me. I am worse than a heretic. I am a pagan. Thinkest thou that for long the goddess of love did consider, when once in fair Ida's grove Anchises charmed her eye? These lines from Goethe's Roman elegies have always delighted me. The love we find in nature is the love of heroic times, when the gods and goddesses did love. In those days, desire would follow upon look, enjoyment on desire. All else was affectation, a lie. It was Christianity, whose cruel emblem, the cross, has always seemed to me somewhat horrific, that first brought an alien and hostile element into nature and its innocent instincts. The struggle of the spirit against the senses is the gospel of modern man. I do not wish to have any part in it. Yes, madame, you belong on Mount Olympus, I replied. But we moderns can no longer tolerate the carefree philosophy of the ancients, especially in matters of love. The idea of sharing a woman with others, even if she is an Aspasia, is revolting to us. Like our God, we are jealous. We have made the name of the lovely Phryne into a term of abuse. We prefer a pale, thin virgin of Holbein, who belongs to us alone, to an antique Venus, no matter how divine her beauty, who today loves Anchises, tomorrow Paris, and the day after Adonis. And if nature gains the upper hand and we succumb in passionate ardor to such a woman, her serene happiness seems diabolical and cruel, and our bliss becomes a sin for which we have to atone. So you too are content with the women of today, these poor hysterical creatures who pursue like sleepwalkers the dream of an ideal man, while failing to appreciate the best of men. They are always lamenting their inability to uphold Christian morals. They deceive and are deceived. They search, choose, and reject. They are never happy and cannot give happiness, and they complain about their fate instead of calmly admitting that they would rather live as Helen and Aspasia did. Nature admits of no stability in the relations between man and woman. Madame, allow me to finish. It is only man's egoism that seeks to bury woman like some treasure. Despite holy ceremonies, oaths, and contracts, no permanence can ever be imposed on love. It is the most changeable element in our transient lives. Can you deny that our Christian world is falling into decay? But you will say, the individual who revolts against the institutions of society is immediately rejected, ostracized, stoned. So be it. I am willing to take the risk. My principles are deliberately pagan. I wish to live as I please, and as for your hypocritical respect, I prefer happiness. Whoever invented Christian marriage was right to have invented morality at the same time. I do not for a moment believe that I am eternal. When I take my last breath, and life on earth is at an end for Wanda von Donahue, what difference will it make to me whether my pure spirit joins the choirs of angels, or whether the dust of my body produces new beings? Since the time will come when I shall no longer exist in my present form, what is the point of self-denial? Shall I belong to a husband I no longer love, under the pretext that I once loved him? No, I shall deny myself nothing. I shall love everyone who attracts me, and give happiness to everyone I love. Is that such a dreadful thing? No, it is better by far than to rejoice at the torments that my charms produce, and virtuously turn away from the poor man who burns with passion for me. I am young, rich, and beautiful, and I live for pleasure. As she spoke, her eyes sparkled with mischief. I had taken hold of her hand without knowing quite what I would do with it, and in true amateurish fashion, I quickly let it drop again. Your frankness delights me, I said, and not only that. Again, the confounded awkwardness paralyzed my throat. You were saying? I was saying. I would like to say. Forgive me, madame, I interrupted you. Oh, really? A long silence. She must be thinking something which in my idiom would no doubt be summed up by the word fool. If I may ask, madame, I ventured at last, how did you arrive at these opinions? It is quite simple. My father was a sensible man. From early childhood, I was surrounded by replicas of classical sculptures. At the age of 10, I read Gil Blas. At 12, The Maid of Orleans. Where other children had Tom Thumb, Bluebeard, or Cinderella as friends, mine were Venus, Apollo, Hercules, and Laocoon. My husband was of a happy disposition, and even the incurable illness that struck him shortly after our marriage did not more than cast a brief shadow over his natural gaiety. The night before his death, he took me into his bed, and often, during the long months when he lay dying in his wheelchair, he would say to me playfully, "Well now, have you taken a lover yet?" I used to blush with shame. Do not hide anything from me, he said. Although the thought pains me, I know that you must find yourself a congenial husband, or even several. You are a good wife, but you are still a child, and you need playthings. Needless to say that as long as he lived, I had no lovers, but it was he who helped me to find my true self, the Grecian woman. The goddess, I interrupted. She smiled. Which goddess? Venus. She frowned and threatened me with her finger. Perhaps even Venus in furs. Wait, I have a very large fur that would cover you from head to foot. I shall catch you in it like a fish in a net. Do you believe, I said with feeling, for an idea had just occurred to me, quite an inept and commonplace idea, which at the time seemed remarkably profound. Do you believe that your theories could be put into practice in our present century? Do you think Venus could display with impunity her joyous, naked charms in the world of today? Not naked, of course, but dressed in fur, yes, she laughed. Would you care to see her? But what then? How do you mean, what then? Beautiful, carefree creatures such as the ancient Greeks can only exist if there are slaves to carry out the prosaic tasks of life. True, she replied mischievously. An Olympian goddess such as I must have a whole army of slaves. Beware of me. Why? I was frightened at the boldness of my why, but she did not appear in the least perturbed. Her lips curled up slightly to reveal her small white teeth, and she asked lightly, as though it were of no consequence, Do you want to be my slave? In matters of love there is no equality, I answered solemnly. If I were faced with the choice of dominating or being dominated, I would choose the latter. It would be far more satisfying to be the slave of a beautiful woman, but I should hate her to be a petty, nagging tyrant. Where should I find a woman to dominate me in a serene and fully conscious manner? Come now, that should not be so difficult. You think not? I, for example, she laughed and arched her back proudly. I have a certain talent for playing despotic roles. I also have the indispensable furs. You were seriously afraid last night, were you not? I was. And now? Now I am beginning to be truly terrified of you.